Hello, my name is Ezekiel Bambolo Jr. I am the writer and creator of the Successful Family Legacy series. I want you to journey back a while with me to 1990. My family, father, mother, siblings, and I are in Liberia, West Africa. See, a treacherous civil war had just begun. And unfortunately for our family, we found ourselves separated. Mainly, my sister, who was at the time attending college, was separated from the rest of the family by some 50 to 75 miles. And we had no means of communication. It wasn't the era in which we have cell phones today. And so we had no means of communication with her, couldn't get a letter to her, because we were separated by three treacherous warring factions. And the atrocities being committed by those warring factions were very great. The desire to approach their area of control uninvited usually warranted a death sentence. And so at this point in time, my parents, who had come to Liberia in 1960 as missionaries, were faced with a very tough decision. You see, the country of Cameroon, our homeland, or my parents' homeland, should I say, had sent a commercial airline to come and evacuate its citizens. My parents, my mother and father, had the choice to leave if they wanted to. In actuality, my sister, even though she was separated from us, we had no idea where she was. We knew that the direction that she could head to safety was the opposite direction from where we were. And so we expected she might do that. However, my father had approached God many times in prayer, asking for discernment on what to do. And he felt that God had told him in his dream, in his vision, that he should stay. And the impact of that decision came in this manner. He walked into my sister's room one day in his dream, and she was lying on her ground on the floor. And he said to her, "You need to come home. We're waiting for you." We had no idea, by the way, that my sister, who was at this time caught in a refugee camp, surrounded by fighting, also appeared to have a similar type of vision in which my father spoke with her in her dream and told her to come home. As a matter of fact, she took action on what that dream said and decided that she was going to make the trip home, treacherous as it was. That trip ended up being about a 2-week journey. A single female walking across 3 warring faction areas, actually completely starved. And the bigger problem was the fear. And so she would have to gauge every time she had to cross one area to the next and make sure that she was not accused of potentially being a spy. My story, however, as a young man, by this time, not knowing all of this was being orchestrated by God, I was a pretty angry young man and thought my father had made the wrong decision. As such, I felt we should have left the country on that airline, and that my sister would be smart enough to go to a neighboring country and to safety rather than come home, since there was a safest path. Well, one afternoon, I sat on our front porch, listening to some music, a Walkman in my ear. If you remember the old Walkmans, not the iPods, the old Walkman. And this lady came up to our front door. You see, the campus, we lived on a boarding campus, and by this time, 6 dormitories were loaded with refugees from all over the country. So in my mind, this was just another refugee, but this lady came walking, there was a young boy by her side carrying a bag. She looked pretty weak and feeble. And within about 6 to 10 feet from our front door and where I was sitting, this lady collapsed and literally began to vomit. And I got up a little puzzled in an attempt to help her out, and the lady said my name. It was my sister. she had come home. And the impact of that observation of mine at that point in time, especially after a few hours of getting her settled, I stopped and thought, what would have happened if my sister had come home and we were indeed gone? There's no doubt in my mind that she would have died on the spot, looking how feeble and weak she was and starved. You see, I could not recognize my sister. She had lost all bodily form from a starvation and dehydration. The greater impact was that my father and mother, especially my father in his decision to stay, left a great impact on each one of our lives. Not just mine, but the rest of my siblings as well. It was an impact that has left a legacy, because it wasn't just once that I've ever seen my father and mother, especially my father, make a decision of that magnitude. But that and those kinds of items have left great impact on our lives, and there are legacies that as his children, we live to sustain and to maintain for the generations yet to come. This is what this is all about. How do we leave a successful family legacy for those who follow us? It is indeed a very powerful process. I would like to talk to you about the process then of leaving a successful family legacy for your children, your dependents, and those who look up to you. Let's define a successful family legacy. A successful family legacy is a process of utilizing healthy societal, emotional, and religious attributes purposefully handed down to us by our parents to live currently in a manner above reproach. It also involves living an exemplary life that allows our dependents a similar or enhanced success for generations to come. You see, in essence, it is about the process of transferring family values and systems that allow our children to live moral and productive lives. See, many times I run across people who say, well, I never had a father or a mother who taught me how to do such a thing. Where do I start? I want to encourage you that even without having one handed to us by our parents or ancestors, with God's instruction manual, we can begin and propagate our own. We are going to approach this video series in this manner. First, we want to talk about some of the cultural concerns that we regularly face in our culture, mainly starting with our wayward culture. We do have a wayward culture that is somewhat confused about the values and what family is all about. We'll tackle some issues, although not specifically in this video, but we will tackle issues concerning problematic early adulthood. A lot of young adults are a bit estranged and confused about what their roles are for their families. We have hopeless young families, unsure about the impact they're leaving with the children they have. We have rebellious teenagers. We have single parents. Fatherlessness has been a big issue in our culture thus far. And now we have a growing motherless issue as well. Estranged adult children, especially young to middle-aged adults, who at this point in time have no real relationships with their ancestors or their parents. And as a result, failed senior years as well. Emotionally, these senior individuals find themselves greatly removed and in essence pushed away from the family circles by those they call their children, adult children. Last but not least, we want to talk about institutional overdependence, the growing trends of depending upon government and other institutions for our day-to-day well-being and our existence, rather than gainful employment and other avenues by which we can live healthy lives. The result, here is the format we will take in these videos. First, we will discuss a cultural problem. Next, my hope is to provide you some solutions, recommendations of how to address that problem. Last but not least, I would ask you, please, at the bottom of each video, you will have an opportunity to leave your opinion in your response or recommendations. And I want to encourage you to please respond and let us know your thoughts about what we have just addressed. My hope is that by video number 3 of this series, I can also select a topic that you have asked us to address as we consider this topic of successful family legacies. So please, give us your opinions, give us your thoughts, let us know something that you want to address, and we will pick a topic to address from your responses in the days to come. For concern number 1, we will be discussing overwhelmed parents. And by overwhelmed parents, we are talking about both parents that are married or single. And when we say overwhelmed parents, we're saying that parents are actually unsure that the impression they're leaving for their family and their children right now will overperform or outperform or outlast the impressions that the culture the culture is leaving on our children. In other words, there are traps and impressions in the culture that are trends. Will our value systems that we have employed outperform those that the culture is leaving on our children? And that's a serious issue that is being considered by especially young parents or parents who have a desire to really leave a lasting legacy on their children. Are some of those concerns of which we speak. Let's look at a few of them. Drug abuse, for example, a very prominent issue in our culture at this point in time. We already briefly spoke about the issue of fatherlessness in the culture. Did you realize that incarceration, in terms of those incarcerated, a good percentage, 65% upwards of those incarcerated are from fatherless homes? There's the issue of immorality in the culture, and that leads to a less than valued view on life as it pertains to abortion. Teen pregnancy, a very big issue. And did you realize also that because of single parenting, 75% of teenage pregnancy come from single parent homes? There's the issue of propaganda. Yes, indeed, we are being fed lies to the culture that we need to be aware of, as well as have a remedy for addressing the propaganda we are exposed to, more importantly, that our children are exposed to. There's the issue of poverty, no doubt. The growing trend for years now in the divorce. Materialism. We have an issue of which now we have given our children the wrong essentials of life. Mainly, we have fed more materialism to our children than is healthy in terms of their existence, long-term existence. There is a question of educational standards as well, the level of education. There's an issue of racism that is still alive and well in the American culture, although much better than before. We have an issue also with the quality of health care across the board for all in the American way of life. Gangs, young people seeking the security and love of a family environment prefer to find it in peers and the violence that those peers project or offer. Homosexuality is a very grave issue as well in our culture right now, exchanging the natural for the unnatural. Government dependency, foster care, and the overwhelming population of children in foster care for such an affluent culture. There is child abuse, a rising unemployment situation in recent years, the issue of alcoholism, injudicious faith, and indeed many, many more unspoken or unlisted here. These are things and concerns that we have to really consider as we desire to impact our children with a multi-generational family legacy, a successful one. As a result, we tend to see that our children, especially our youth, are a bit confused. On the one hand, they want to be very loving and caring and obedient youth, yet they have a conflict of understanding exactly how to communicate their feelings. And as a result, as you can see from this image, they are a bit torn. While it may appear that the solution to our problems, as I've described a bit in terms of overwhelmed parents, may be a bit simple, I believe it is quite essential that we understand the impact and the solution it requires. And it starts, first of all, with understanding exemplary living, and especially so as parents. Exemplary living, first of all, as you'll see from this quote, excellence is a better teacher than mediocrity. The lessons of the ordinary are everywhere. Truly profound and original insights are to be found only in studying the exemplary. Another thought to consider here, and now as I speak obviously from a biblical standpoint, there is a Bible verse, 1 Peter 2:12. Live an exemplary life among the natives, so that your actions will refute their prejudices. A couple of thoughts to consider. So as I talk about exemplary living and its impact as a solution to our issue of having overwhelmed parents, allow me to open up a couple of things for you to consider as well, especially as it begins with us as Christians. Even non-Christians can attest to this because they have realized the impact of, yes, Jesus Christ on our world. And I say that because, did you realize that Jesus Christ only had 3 years of ministry on this earth? Those 3 years, he had a number of disciples. However, there were 12 that were most intimate in relationships with him. Now, the way he taught those 12 men was by making sure that he took them everywhere he went that he could afford to. Even when he went to separate himself to prayer time, he still took a few of them to be by his side, maybe at a distance, but yet close by. And I say that because it is very much evidence in that action how important Christ felt exemplary living it was for his disciples to follow. Yes, at the crucifixion there was disarray and confusion, and they were afraid. Yet he did what he said he would do by resurrecting on the third day. And as those men observed that exemplary life in speech and action, guess what? 12 men changed our world forever in terms of who we are today, especially in America as a society built on Christian principles. The impact of exemplary living. Furthermore, in the beginning of this whole video session, give you some example of my opening testimony of how the exemplary lives of my parents, especially my father, from one man to another, impacted my life and that of my siblings and all of those around us. You see, what I actually meant to portray for you by that discussion was that my father and mother did an exemplary job of leaving monuments in the lives of each of their children that today empowers us to live upright, productive lives that absolutely cater to those that are coming after us and making sure that we do the best we can to continue to provide and build monuments for our children just the same, because we know how well those monuments have impacted. And that is what living a legacy is all about. It's about leaving monuments in the lives of our children that are undeniable because they have seen it through our exemplary living. We could write a lot of books, we could do a lot of video or write diaries, whatever, but it matters that they see how we live, whether we are their parents or their primary caretakers. Extremely important. Here's another image of additional monuments that my parents left. My father was a very, very stern disciplinarian. As I say that, you would expect that my father was one of those that really understood spare the rod and spoil the child. That means he would probably discipline us with spanking quite frequently. Absolutely, that was quite contrary. You see, he would always use a a line, a saying. My father would frequently say that every time you have done something wrong that requires or merits a discipline, possibly a spanking, imagine that you have this long piece of rope. And every time you make a mistake, you have just cut a piece of that rope. And eventually you'll cut enough of that rope to where I must step in and actually be the disciplinarian in terms of a spanking or potential punishment. However, it taught us as children to be very responsible in how we carried ourselves. Rather than being reactive, rather than respond uncontrollably to things that were around us, we learned to be to exhibit restraint. And as a result, it has carried into our lives as well, that we are very calm, preferably collected, even in the midst of challenging situations. I try to carry out that same monument with my children in terms of understanding what disciplining them with regards to spanking really is, and how much my preference to take that monument one step further is that by age 2 or 3, my wife and I are done with any desire or any reason to have to spank our children. And by dialogue, we should be able to get things done that we have desired to accomplish in their lives. An example of a monument put in place from one generation to the next that remains effective. So, I also want to encourage you to understand a topic that I use a lot during our seminars and conversations. And it's a process of effective learning, which I also call affectionately the 4 E's. It starts, and I want you to realize as I describe this process of effective learning to you, realize that the components that I will describe exist at every level of our growth, from infant to adulthood. Every component exists at every level. However, at each phase of our life, one component seems to be most prominent than the other. What do I mean? It starts by understanding what it means to be an exhibit, a great attitude and demeanor before our children. And I'll start by, if you understand how the mind of an infant, especially about a year old, maybe 2 years old, you realize and you recall, if you have children, that there is a moment when they copy everything we do. See, we teach by exhibition, by exhibiting. They are so observant, and we frequently say, wow, she acts just like you, or he acts just like you. Well, that's because at that point of stage in life, our children learn most by observing us. There's a time that we move to a level of education, maybe about the toddler years and into our preteen years or teen years. There's more of a conversation and education going on where we are instructing and speaking to them more clearly about what we expect of them. Now they're at a place where they can understand our conversations and seek to execute on what we have asked. Next is the opportunity of exercising. Many parents fall victim to this time when they are so frustrated because they fail to realize that by the teen to early adulthood years, our children are more and more seeking to exercise what we have taught them. Yes, they're testing the waters. They're testing the edges. It seems as if they are being defiant when they're doing everything by exercising themselves, that these thoughts that we've given them, they're doing everything to establish their independence. This is a point where we have to understand that we have to be doing a better job in conversation and dialogue and quality time with our children. Because they are seeking to be exalted, to be approved. And because of our lack of understanding, we usually define that moment or that phase of life as a defiant role. See, if we understood the process of effective learning, we'll probably address and respond to our children in a better manner. Last but not least is what I call the process of evaluation. Normally, we find this most prominent during the young adult years and into that relationship where we have transitioned from a child and a parent to more almost of comrades, one adult to the other. And yet and still, most parents find themselves very tempted to be overbearingly involved in the lives of their adult children as they are not raising their own children. Where our role should be more of that of an evaluator. We might get a question here and there. They might seek our opinion. And as such, we are watching, observing, evaluating, and giving proper advice as to where they are in life. However, many times we seem to overstep our boundaries and cause dissension rather than be healthy evaluators. Just some thoughts to consider again as you look at how are you going to outperform, how is your legacy going to outperform the influences of the culture on your child's life. For our next session of this video series, we want to tackle the issue of cultural awareness. In other words, how aware are you of the deliberate cultural pitfalls which seek to render you ineffective as a parent or destroy your family? They do exist. And in our next video, I will prove those items do exist, those issues in our culture exist, and they are deliberate. And then what discovery or learning method or mechanism do you use or employ to avoid those pitfalls? Remember, I've asked you to please not only listen to this and watch this video series, but I would like for you to like and comment on this series. Below this video is your opportunity to leave your thoughts and opinions, your responses, and as well your suggestions for what our next video series should cover. We certainly want to partner with you in this process, and we thank you for your involvement. Again, my name is Ezekiel Bambolo. I am the creator and writer of the Successful Family Legacy series. Have a great day.